So today, inshallah, we'll talk about zakah. Uh, and inshallah, we'll try to simplify things. We'll start from the basics. And inshallah, we'll go into a little bit more detail. We'll talk about zakat being a pillar of Islam. Alhamdulillah, most of us know that zakat is fard. And there are categories and calculations on when zakat becomes first. We'll start from that. So who needs to give zakat? Then how do we calculate? There are sometimes questions about this. How do we calculate it? I have money coming in, going out the whole year. How do I know what is nisab? How do I calculate the year? What can I subtract from my assets? What assets to include? So we'll talk about those calculations. And then we'll talk about zakat recipients, inshallah. Who can we give zakat to? So we'll talk about that. And then some a little bit more modern fiqh masail on investments. So like when somebody has stocks, so how do I pay zakat on stocks? If somebody has 401k, IRAs, even for that matter, cryptocurrency. So inshallah, we'll try to cover all of that. And at any point, if you have questions, inshallah, feel free to stop. We'll try to basically wrap up before 7:45 Isha. So we want to wrap up, give few minutes before so that people can do wudu and stuff. But I'm here, inshallah. So if there are questions that are pending afterwards, we can address them after Isha as well. But yeah, at any point, if you have questions, we can address that. If it's relevant for that slide, we can address it right away. Or we can do a Q&A at the end. Either way works, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ تَجِدُوهُ عِندَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Establish prayer. Establish salah and pay zakat. And whatever good you send forth for yourselves, you will certainly find its reward with Allah. And surely Allah is all seeing of what you do. So this comes a lot in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions salah and zakat almost together multiple times. That waqimus salah, establish salah, and atu zakat. So this is a very recurrent theme in the Quran, that salah and zakat mentioned together. In another place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةٌ تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ صَلَاتَكَ سَكُنٌ لَهُمْ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. So take, O Muhammad, from your wealth a charity by which you purify them and cause them to increase, and invoke Allah's blessings upon them. Indeed, your invocations are reassurance for them, and Allah is hearing and knowing. So there are two aspects to zakat. One is purification aspect. There is some problem with the wire. Okay. So there are two aspects to zakat. One is the purification aspect, that when we give zakat, it's a means of purification of our rest of amal. And there is an aspect, zakah also, that's why tazkiyah, that's one meaning, purification. One is the purification of wealth, one is purification of our soul, but there's also another meaning of increasing. So this is actually something, when I was starting off for my professional career, one of my relatives told me, you want to do calculation of zakat properly and pay zakat properly, inshallah Allah will increase your wealth. And this actually, I invite a lot of people, mashallah, have IT background and familiar with computers. I invite everybody, inshallah, I do this personally too, that you make a sheet every year, and then you do your calculations of zakat. Next year, make a new tab, add those calculations. And if you plot your graph every year, if we do our best of calculating zakat, inshallah, of nisab, you can yourself see Allah will increase, as well. You will see, inshallah, the graph going up of the nisab. When nisab is going up, then wealth is increasing. Although that's not the reason we do it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising increase. And this sometimes goes against our aql, against our maths. If I give somebody if I have $100 and I lend it on interest, and he gives me $2.50 interest on it, so now the math says you got 102.5, so your money increased, right? And if I have $100 and I'm paying zakat on it, $2.50, so I have to subtract, and it's 97.50. So math is saying that when you pay zakat, your asset is going down, you get interest, apparently you think that it is going up. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't always work like this, That's why sometimes we think that somebody might have, for example, a monthly income of $5,000, and let's say their expenses are $6,000. So then you are $1,000 in the negative, the red. But somebody has $3,000, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. Their needs get fulfilled in $3,000 and $2,000, let's say. So even though he's earning less, he has more barakah in his earnings, and he's able to take care of his needs. So that's why, although literally also you will see more often than not, it will actually go up. So another hadith, it mentions, قال عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بني الإسلام على خمس شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة والحج وصوم رمضان. This is very famous. We might have heard it in a lot of Jummah khutbahs and speeches in general. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is narrating that Islam is based on 5 principles: shahada, offering salah, congregation with prayer, with khushu and khuzu, paying zakat, hajj, and fasting. So Ramadan is coming up, and although not necessary that we give zakat in Ramadan, but we see often the community ends up taking out zakat in Ramadan. And fasting is also coming up. We have, inshallah, have shahada as well. We have, and hajj is also following up very close. So it's very, so Rasulullah SAW gave an example of a tent, that these 5 pillars are like an example of a tent, and the center pillar is the shahada. If we don't have the center pillar of the tent, then the tent cannot stand. If we have a lot of good deeds, but without iman, then the tent cannot stand. But what we have to do is salah and hajj and Saum and Ramadan and Zakat. We have to try and make this pillar. So each one of us need to audit ourselves, that how well have I established this tent of Islam in my life. Sometimes certain things are easier for some. So like, for example, it might be easy for someone to pray salah regularly. But then when it comes about spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's hard sometimes. We have different tabiyat, we have different adat and things which sometimes make us the way we are. Some are spenders, some are savers by nature. So when we think about, what are you talking about, that I have to give money from my money? This is my hard-earned money. I worked hard for it. This is my intelligence, my hard work. You're telling me I have to give money out of this? So it's sometimes harder. Like, it might be easier to pray salah, but harder to take out money. Sometimes for some people it's easier to give money in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but harder to pray salah and so on. So all have to be established. We have to establish all 5. Because these are not optional. We're not talking about optional ibadat. In optional ibadat, the more we do, inshallah, we get more reward. Ramadan is coming up. For every nafil, we get a reward of fard. 1 fard, the reward of 70 fard. So, but the fard have to be taken care of. The obligations have to be taken care of. And then we increase our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing more and more nawafil. So, just a quick question. Although this second line came as well in this, so maybe, so let's say I earn $100,000 in a year, right? Then how much zakat should I give? Maybe somebody has any thoughts. Somebody has an income of $100,000. How much zakat should they give? Any thoughts?
0.
0? Okay. What was the reason for 0?
Well, you need to have that money for 1 year.
Okay.
If you are not earning in that particular year, whatever you earn in that particular year, not counted.
Any other answers? Last time we did this session, there were a lot of kids as well. Somebody said 16%. So, but there is a difference. Like brother said, it's not like income tax. Income tax and zakat is different. If we earn a certain amount of money, Uncle Sam is going to come after his cut, whether we have 100,000 in expenses or 50,000 in expenses or 20,000 expenses. Income tax is always a fixed rate of your income. Zakat is not a tax, right, like that. Zakat is not on income. So there is calculations on this, like how much, like brother said, do I have for a year? How do we calculate the year? And there are certain liabilities and debts you can deduct. And then if it is more than the nisab, then you can. So that the point I was trying to make here is that we shouldn't treat zakat like a tax. In tax we are always looking for deductions and ways to we hire special smart people, mashallah, to come up with creative ways on how I can reduce my tax liability, hopefully legally. Right? But zakat approach should not be like a tax. Rather, this is a opportunity for us to do ibadah. This is a worship. Zakat is a worship. That's why Sahaba radiallahu anhu, one time, there was at that time, Rasulullah's time, there used to be zakat collectors assigned, and people would come and then they would look at the assets. So Sahaba, you would consider this a matter of pride that I got this opportunity. One Sahabi is saying, I had never had this opportunity before. This is the first time I got this opportunity that the Amir is coming and he's able to. So he wanted to give more than what was due to him. You might have heard this story. And then they went to Rasulullah. He said, okay, due is whatever the zakat collector is saying, but if you want to give more, it is better for you. So Sahaba radiallahu anhu's attitude was that how can I give more and more? It was not intended to be treated like a liability, that how I can avoid and minimize, but rather this is a worship. So again, what is due, we should definitely give. More than that, even rather, we should try and give voluntary sadaqahs. So who needs to pay zakat, right? There are some conditions, like brother was mentioning earlier, that there are some conditions that have to be met for you to have to pay zakat. One is that a person has to be Muslim. So to give zakat, we have to be Muslim. He has to be free. He has to be a free person, although we don't have this concept of slaves. So, but in general, alhamdulillah, that is fine. But in general, the requirement from a fiqh perspective that a person should be free. Should also be baligh. Baligh should be mature from Islamic perspective, which relates to puberty or 15 years of age, whichever comes first. And a person has to be sane, because this is a worship. That's why bulugh is a criteria, sanity is a criteria, and then he has to own nisab. There is a specific number for that to be called wealth, or what is wealth. And then we say, the lunar year has to pass. So this is what makes zakat farz. So you have to be Muslim, free, baligh, sane, and have wealth, nisab, for a lunar year. At any point, if you have questions, inshallah, feel free to stop me. So how do I calculate zakat?
What is nisab? In the previous slide, what is nisab? What is that number?
I'll inshallah explain that, inshallah ji. What does nisab mean? There's a separate slide for it. But the point I was trying to make is that we need to include all our assets, what's called zakatable assets. So what we will do is, we will look at zakatable assets total. We'll talk about this. There are not all assets that we own are zakatable assets. And then we will subtract from it short-term liabilities. So total zakatable assets minus our total short-term liabilities. And if it's greater than 2 benchmarks, and we'll talk about this about more as well, but there were 2 benchmarks. One is of gold and one is of silver. So either 20 dinar or gold coins, which is 87.48 at that time, 20 dinar. Now scholars have said that this is what the calculation comes out to, 87.48 grams of gold. But approximately, when I was last checking, was in February 11th, $14,000, 179. That's the gold benchmark. And the silver benchmark is 200 dirhams or silver coins, which is 612 grams of silver, approximately $1,600 that it comes. So, and we'll talk about how to choose which one to use. But basically, the overall framework is that we'll take total zakatable assets, we will subtract short-term liabilities. If it is greater than one of these benchmarks and a lunar year has passed over it, then we pay 2.5% of the zakat. So either 2.5% or divide by 40, whatever. But this is a calculation that needs to be done. It cannot be approximated. Sometimes we see people will say, okay, I'm going to give you $1,000 in zakat. But we don't know, because we never calculated how much was the exact value. It could have been 900, in which case it's fine. But if it was more, then there was some pending. That's why it's important that we all calculate zakat properly.
What comes under short-term liabilities?
Inshallah, if you, I'll address that. So each of these buckets I will have, inshallah, address it, inshallah. So how do we calculate zakat calculation date, right? Because there is some confusion sometimes about how do I how is a lunar year? So like first I said, it is a lunar year. But if we take an example of a student, so let's say it's a student, this person has no asset at this time, and this first graduated, found a job, let's say on 1st of Muharram, and he gets a job that pays $6,000 a month, for example. Now he had loans, or he bought stuff, clothes and furniture. After that, he doesn't have enough of nisab, the silver or the gold. So now, even though he has started making income, zakat is still not fard on him. So his calculations have not even started yet. But let's say now first Shawwal comes around, and that's when his assets minus liabilities crosses nisab for the first time, right? So now this is the date he will start. He'll take, okay, this is first Shawwal. This is my date from which I'm going to start calculating. Now next year, first Shawwal, he will again take a snapshot of assets and liabilities. If he still has more than nisab, more than the gold and silver or the silver nisab, then he will pay zakat for that snapshot. So let's say first Shawwal came, so he will take a snapshot of all his assets, snapshot of his liabilities, do the calculation math, and then whatever number comes, now that is the zakat. Now in between there will always be fluctuations, and that's why the scholars have recommended taking a snapshot method, because otherwise it will be very hard to track. Like you might have income coming in all the year, you have, and then you have you have spending it throughout the year as well. So as long as throughout the year we stayed over nisab, we never went to zero, our zakat, our assets and liabilities never went to zero, then the fluctuations are not accounted for. You take a snapshot at the end for that year, and then that becomes your liability. Now at that point, when you take a snapshot, it is possible that money came a day before, right? So that's why I'm saying that the lunar year calculation, we will do it for the first time to figure out when to calculate. But as long as we are above the nisab and we stay above zero throughout in between the year, we still use that date. We take a snapshot. Now, even if $1,000 came yesterday, I still include it. If I spent $10,000 yesterday, I still get deducted. Now it's a snapshot right now. So this is now the zakat date annually going forward. First Shawwal every year, you take a snapshot and pay zakat on it. Like I said, otherwise, if then you'll be doing math all year, right? You have this $1,000 that came in January. So this $1,000 year ended in this month, and then so it's just not practical. So the scholars recommend that we take a snapshot method. And now next year, let's say 1446, he had a zakatable amount of $1,500. He'll pay 2.5% of that, like 37.5. One more year passes. Let's say now he has $5,000. So now he will pay 2.5% of that, $125. So every year that becomes the date going forward. That's why it's important to fix a date. It doesn't have to be Ramadan. But so what typically happens, unless there are some youngsters who are, as they grow and mashallah they have learned it, the masail, while they are building those assets, often people don't know their dates, like when they reach Nisa for the first time. So in that case, I always recommend that we do a best guess. If we don't have a guess as well, then we can pick a date, but do that date every year. It cannot be general Ramadan. I will do calculation whenever I can in Ramadan. It has to be a specific day in of a month when you do the calculations. But once you do the calculations, you can either prepay or you can postpay. You don't have to disburse it on that day, but the calculations have to be done on that day. And then, but in between this year, if at any point the assets minus liabilities went to zero or less, then he's now outside the pool of zakat payers. So now the process starts again. When he hits nisab, then you start calculating the year again. But otherwise, if it never happens that it went to zero, we fix that date and then do the calculation every year on that date. Are you okay? Okay. So what are non-zakatable assets? So in general, anything of personal use is not zakatable. So the house that we live in, the cars that we drive, they are not zakatable. And it could be any value. Somebody might be driving a BMW, somebody might be driving a Nissan. Whatever the value of that car is, that value of the car, as long as for personal use, is not something you include in zakat. Uh, Same way in home, somebody might have a really expensive home, somebody might be living in a basic home. The home value is not the one that we live in, is not included in zakat. Personal or household items that we use, somebody might have an expensive phone or anything like that, anything of personal use in general. Jewelry other than gold and silver, so like diamond, platinum, uh, or diamonds, emeralds, those are not considered as what's called malnami, so they are not zakatable. But gold and silver, and again there's some difference of opinion there, but gold and silver are by nature, they are basically the currency, so they are always zakatable. A rental property, somebody has a rental property, then as long as the intention when we bought this house was to rent the house, then the value of the property is not included. The rent that we get from the house, that will be part of the cash flow. And if that stays in the account when we take the snapshot, then we include it like any other salary or cash flow in incoming flow. But if somebody had made a intention to resell, like if let's say my business is that I flip houses, then that's trade merchandise. So we'll talk about zakatable assets. So this is talking about intention of either renting or staying ourselves. Or if somebody has a business, somebody is running a business, not all assets owned by a business are zakatable. So the warehouse where he's storing the inventory, the vehicle, the machinery that you have, anything that's not directly for sale, right, or not a raw material to it. So let's say somebody has a shirt factory, so the machines that actually sewing the garment is not going to be included, but the raw materials that are used in the factory to make shirts and finished products, they will all be included. So in general, personal items, like I said, intention should be not be for resale, are not included in zakatable assets. So what are zakatable assets? These basically are assets with potential for growth or acquired with the intention to resell. So you'll use the current market value for them. So like I said, cash or cash equivalent. So when we are doing the calculation, whatever cash we have in the account, we include those dollar amounts. Any money market accounts we have. Cryptocurrency, I'll hold, we can get back to it. But in general, cryptocurrency is included. Gold, silver, and even jewelry. There are actually hadiths to support this opinion as well. But those gold and jewelry should be included as well in our calculations for zakat. Even if we use it personally, then because gold by nature, like I said, is currency. So gold, silver, gold, anything that has more than 50% of the alloy is gold, because usually we don't have 100% gold alloy. If it's more than 50%, so if it's a 24 carat, it's 100%. As long as more than 12 carat gold, we include the current market value of it when we do zakat calculations. Any cash flow we are getting, rents, dividends, receivables that we have already sold stuff. If somebody's running a business, they've already sold something, they're expecting money to be received, they just haven't received it yet. Tax returns that are already, the transaction is done, we just have to receive it. Or we have lent money to somebody, then that's a little bit of a discussion point. When we lend somebody some money, if we expect to get it back, then we should include it. If we have lent it and now it doesn't seem like we're going to give it back, then those can be excluded. Trade merchandise, like I was saying, somebody has a factory of garments, so the shirts that they have in the inventory on the day of calculation, you include them. The cotton or whatever raw materials you have, you include them. Same way, whatever the business, so if somebody is a car dealer, they sell and buy cars, so now that's trade merchandise for them. So the intention was to resell of something, then that gets included in trade merchandise. If something was to use or to rent, then you're not intending to be sold, then those will not be included. There are some more special cases of zakatable assets, like livestock. Usually these scenarios don't occur for most of the people, so that's why if it does happen with you, livestock, agriculture produce, mines, treasure, they are calculated separately. So if you have that scenario, we can definitely discuss afterwards. But usually those don't apply. Now let's talk about liabilities. So sometimes people think that, I have a mortgage and that is debt. That is a $500,000 whatever amount house, so I can just subtract the whole amount that's left to be paid, uh, and then I think I don't have zakat due on me. But then what scholars are recommending is that whatever payments we are going to make in the next 12 months, we have already had a payment schedule. Hopefully, it's non-interest based uh, loans. Then whatever loan we have that we have to only pay, we can only deduct what you're going to pay in the next 12 months, what you're liable for. Only those mortgages. Hopefully, like I said, interest, not interest based. If it is an interest based transaction, then the interest component of the transaction cannot be deducted, because that was wrong to begin with. So inshallah, we try to do tawbah and try to get out of it. But in general, otherwise, if it's a halal mortgage payment or a 0% car loan, anything that's a debt, you don't deduct the whole debt, because you have no intention of paying it right now. You only deduct what you're going to pay in the next 12 months. Now, the ideal scenario is that because it's not a good thing to be in debt in general. So the ideal scenario is if we have assets, we pay off the debt earlier, get out of it, and then the more debt you paid off, then it's not automatically not included in the calculations, because it's not part of the snapshot anymore. But we should try to basically, this is a thought process in United States, that we always stay in debt, never pay off. We should not. This is not necessarily a process that you want to be in. Ideally, you want to be debt free, because there are a lot of implications of having debt, even when a person passes away in general. If somebody is on a rent, you can only deduct current month's rent that's due. So when you do the calculation, whatever month's rent is due, you can reduce that. Any credit card transactions that you already made, so at that point, whatever is balance due, because your expectation is you're going to pay it in full, so those are transactions you're going to pay right away. Those can be deducted from your short-term liabilities. So when you do the calculation, you're basically going to do assets minus liabilities, and then that's the number you're going to look at when you take the snapshot. Now, when we do the assets minus the liabilities, it has to still be greater than what we were referring earlier, called nisab. So during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the silver and gold values used to be similar. So this number that we were talking about, the dinars and dirhams calculation, they used to come out same, but now silver is lagging behind. Gold has become a lot more expensive. So there is a discrepancy in the value, and very large. So the silver value comes to, like I was saying earlier, and it changes. So that's why you need to look at what's the silver value on the day you are paying, so that you can figure out also, or gold, because then you can see what's the current market value for the gold you're including in your assets. Also, you can look at what's the nisab calculation for that day. But it could be either $14,000 or $1,600. So now which one to use? Because now there is a big gap. Earlier, like I said, it used to be same, so you could use either. But now there is a difference. So if somebody has no zakatable assets and have only gold, then they can use the gold nisab. If somebody has only silver, then they can use the silver nisab. Like sometimes, like I was saying, a lot of times general women tend to have jewelry that's mostly gold. So they could use gold nisab if it's just gold assets. But usually, in general, what we see people having is a mix of assets. Usually, and that's what financial advisors also will tell you. Don't invest everything in, don't put everything in one basket, you have to spread your distributions. So people have different things. You have cash, you have gold, you have silver, you have stocks, you might have different things. So when you do have different things, scholars recommend that it is better to be a giver. So when we take silver to make ourselves eligible to give zakat, the hand that gives is better than the hand that takes. So we should try and be in the giver category. So more people will be givers if we take the silver. So it's better that we take the silver nisab if we have mixed assets. So if somebody, after doing the assets minus liabilities, if that number comes out to be more than $1,600, then we try to give zakat. But like I said, this between silver and gold is the gray area. So sometimes if somebody is in very much need because of a certain scenario, they could potentially get it. But then you should talk to scholars in general. So like I said, the better is to use silver so that we can be a giver. Now, once I've determined that who to give zakat to, who can I give? Once I've determined that I have to give zakat, I have to now figure out who to give zakat to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined those categories in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in Surah Tawbah, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها ومؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. So there are 8 categories of people who can be given zakat. One is the fuqara, the poor, masakin, the needy, amilin, the one who are employed to administer it, mu'allafat al-qulub, for those whose hearts were attracted to the faith, al-riqab, for freeing slaves, al-gharimin, for those who are in debt, and fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ibn sabil, for needy travelers. So let's talk about each of these categories, what they mean. So the major first 2 categories that typically we think about when you're doing zakat is poor categories. There's the fuqara, which is the poor, and the masakin, the needy. And there is some scholarly debate on what is the meaning of fuqara and which one is. So, but what fuqara is, one opinion is that a fakir is the one who has more than basic needs, like his basic needs are met, the living expenses are met, but does not possess nisab. So that is fakir. And miskin is extremely needy, that even the basic needs are not met. And some scholars define it the other way, that fuqara is the one whose basic needs are not met, and miskin are the one whose basic needs are met but don't have nisab. So somebody has zakatable assets minus liabilities is less than $1,400, they would be also, for example, eligible. Then amilin, the one who are employed to administer it. Like I said, during the time of Rasulullah, there used to be an Islamic head of state assigned a zakat collector who would go and collect zakat. So this category is for them who used to, and this is basically only one of the categories that is in exchange of a service that they have dedicated. So this is a zakat collector appointed by the Islamic head of state. So often we see people expand this definition, but this was the original category. And the mu'allafatul qulub, those hearts are to be attracted to faith. These were the ones who recently accepted Islam and their hearts had not fully settled in religion. So Rasulullah used to give them from zakat as well. But during time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu mentioned that this was initially that Islam was not set up, was not strong enough. Now Islam has had strength. So this does not need to be given anymore. So during time of Khulafa Rashidin, then they stopped giving zakatul mu'allafatul qulub. Of course, if they are poor, new Muslims, then they can be given as well, because they would be the fuqara and masakin. But yeah, some jurists actually believe that this category is now suspended and does not applicable anymore. And some other scholars actually say that even though it's now stopped, if in the future there is a condition arises again, then it could be restarted. And then the riqab, for freeing of slaves, again, we don't see that as much nowadays. The ones who are in debt. So that debt is so much more than the assets. And like I said, we have to kind of view this in with understanding. Like somebody has, let's say, $500,000 of assets. He goes and buys $1 million house, and he says, I have $1 million of debt, so I can actually take zakat. That's why not what being referred to here, right? So if somebody has zakatable assets, then we should sell them to pay off the debt first. And this sometimes we see, and that's why there's some due diligence needed to be done when we give zakat. This actually happened in some people we know back in India, that this auntie used to take zakat, and then when she passed away, when the calculations were being done for inheritance, it was found that she had a lot of gold of her own, so she was not really eligible to pay zakat, to receive zakat. So then the scholars there said that all the people who have paid zakat all these years, they need to be given the money back and then the inheritance can be distributed, because she took zakat when she was not eligible to take zakat. Okay, but we need to do some due diligence. We don't go and say, show me your bank balance, and then I will give zakat. But we should try and figure out that this person is actually in need and actually in debt. The path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this again has more description. We'll talk about that if needed. The needy travelers, Ibn Sabil, that when a person is traveling and now he might have money back home, but now he is in a place where he doesn't have access to that funds anymore. Although now in modern financial system, you have access to your funds everywhere you go. But maybe something like this could apply for, let's say, refugees who had assets of their own, but they had to leave their country. Now they are not even able to get back to them, and now they are poor. They don't have assets here. They don't have access to their own assets. So, but they would automatically become poor here as well. So these are the categories that can be given zakat. Now, zakat cannot be given to certain people. Like if it's the Banu Hashim, is the descendants of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we cannot give zakat to them. We should help them out. We should give them gifts in other way, but we should not give zakat. Same thing, the masjid, school, university, because the zakat needs to be given and somebody has to be made owner of it. An institution and organization cannot be an owner. They will be disbursing the funds on their behalf if needed. But a poor student who is studying in the maktab, a poor student who is studying in a school or university, or they could potentially get zakat. Similarly, like construction projects are going on, we cannot use zakat that we think will help everybody as a community. We cannot give zakat to our own spouses, and we cannot give zakat to parents, father, grandfather, grandmother, like that. Also our children, grandchildren down. Siblings can be given zakat. Siblings can be given zakat, inshallah. If they are eligible, if they don't have enough, they're poor, they can be given zakat. Actually, it's better the relatives who can be given zakat. We'll talk about this a little bit as well. The relatives who can be given zakat should be prioritized because they have more rights because of being a relative. Non-Muslims cannot be given zakat. Public utility projects, because again we need an owner, we cannot be given zakat.
Madrasa is included in the school and university.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, you wouldn't give it to a madrasa; they are going to disburse it to a poor student who might be studying in a madrasa. So they are acting like wakil basically on their behalf of the students. But yeah, you cannot. The organization cannot take zakat by itself. There are some other clauses as well. One is zakat will only be valid if the recipient is made owner of the amount. And we cannot impose conditions. That I feel that an appropriate use of this money is this, so you have to use it like this. So when we say owner, like, think about it like this: if I have money of my asset and somebody else comes and tells me, you cannot buy this, I was like, why? This is my money, I want to be able to buy it. The same way, when we are giving zakat, we have to make that person the owner. Zakat doesn't have to be given in money form, it could be given in other ways. But again, we should not try to impose our own thought process that we think that this is going to be better for them. Although, yeah, if there are situations like, for example, sometimes there are people who will ask zakat every time and then they misspend it. So then we try to see if that is the person you want to give zakat to. But in general, we need to make them the owner of the amount. Then when giving money, intention of zakat has to be made. It's not something I can make post giving money away, because this is ibadah, this is worship. So we have to make intention while we separate it out to pay zakat, or before giving. Or it can't be done after the fact. I already spent some money helping out my relative before. I did not make an intention of zakat. So now I cannot calculate it into zakat now. What I personally recommend is to try to find zakat recipients directly, right? There are, especially in Atlanta, mashallah, a lot of refugees have been here. If you go there and we see the families, you'll see they have like nothing. Like, I've seen houses, 0 items in their house. So we try to find recipients, eligible things, people who can be given zakat directly. If we pay to an organization, then we should figure out what are their operational expenses. Because this is an area that can have sometimes operational expenses. So we try to find out, and we should ask organizations, what are your operational expenses? Ideally, our operation expenses should not be subtracted from this zakat distribution charity. But we see sometimes funds getting misutilized. So that's why we should give it to an organization we trust. We know how they are spending the money. Like I said, better to give it direct, because until that organization has to disburse it to a poor person, then the zakat gets, let's say the organization kept the money and did not give it. So the final state of somebody being made owner has not happened yet. If somebody has a deserving relatives,
giving zakat to organizations, I just want to know that recently we have a lot of organizations holding seminars and meetings, and they, they bid for each other and they give it. Sometime I'm not sure whether this is purely zakat money or it is zakat plus the sadaqah, but they also say that we accept zakat. Do you really support this kind of getting money from such kind of activity? Or
So
you
that's
think
why I was
people
saying
should do?
it's a very good question. And actually, recently you might have people who might, I don't want to call out names, but there was a recent news about a certain person who was taking 30% of the funds raised for some other cause. Even like there is a question whether that cause got it or whether that person got it. But to your point, sometimes the money doesn't make it to the people you think you're giving it to.
No, we
Yeah,
know that it is
yeah,
going to the right people. We don't have the question to their intentions
okay.
or their working. But just making a show of making zakat as that I'm giving this much, whether we don't know whether it is zakat or sadaqah, but they
जी,
announce it is a zakat also.
yeah, in general, we should not show off our good deeds. So, unless it is like a person has a really good, pure intention that I'm giving it, letting people know so that other people would get encouraged. But in general, that's why it's better to. But yeah, if somebody has a really pure intention that the reason they're giving is so that other people also get encouraged, so then that would be okay. But the point I was trying to make is that we should try to find out what the operational costs are. Ideally, they should not subtract operational costs from it.
So to your second point, right, when you say the intention of zakat must be made,
Ji.
is it like we have to tell them that?
No, no. You don't have to tell the recipient. The recipient doesn't need, as long as you know they are eligible, you need to make intention
Okay.
that this is zakat money, that I'm giving. Yeah.
So can these organizations be considered as administrators? Can they be administrators of zakat?
There are different discussions on this point, but usually they are basically an agent, like representation. They are representing the people who needs to finally get it. So let's say there are poor people who live in a different country, and this organization is their representative collecting on their behalf and then disbursing it to them. So that's why I was saying, like, but there are usually operational expenses that cut out of it. Sometimes can be really large. So we should ask. We should know where our money is going. Yeah.
I mean, you have mentioned that as a service,
जी
administrators can take
जी
some amount of
yeah. So that category of the zakat collectors, uh, again, that is was if it is assigned by the Islamic head of state, that is a zakat collector formally. Yeah. And each adult is responsible for their own zakat. So, like, let's say the wife has assets of her own, and the husband has assets of his own. Each are responsible for their own zakat. Now, a husband could, on behalf of the wife, pay zakat, but he has to get her permission. Like they should have had that discussion that I'm going to pay it on your behalf, because it's really the responsibility of the person who owns the asset to give zakat. And like I was saying, the receiving person need not be told that it is from zakat. We don't want them to be embarrassed. We as long as we know it's a needy person, we can give zakat. You can prepay, you can post pay, but the calculation should be done on your nisab date. The calculation has to be done, and we try to make a template for it so that you know what are your accounts. There are online lot of zakat calculators, but you still have to do. But you have an account in this bank and this bank and this bank, and you invest in these places, so you can make your own customized Excel sheet, and then do the calculations every year as well if you are comfortable with that. If somebody only has gold, and this happens sometimes that there is no cash in their assets, they only have gold in the assets. So then, how do they pay zakat for it? So you could either donate from the gold directly, or you can sell some of it, or you can delay it if you feel that cash is coming. Like I said, it doesn't have to be disbursed right away. Although people try to disburse more of it in Ramadan because there's more reward of every good deed, but it can be disbursed prepaid or postpaid as long as we have firm intention of disbursing it, inshallah.
I have one more question.
Ji.
If somebody comes to you and gives you a gold and say you keep it with you as amana, and he dies during the process, and he has his children behind him, and they are nabalig, how do you then go about on that issue?
Yeah, this is a tricky situation, but yeah, in general, if let's say there are Balik children, then it's easier. Yeah, I know it is an easier situation, but then we'll have to figure out because and that's where wills are important. We should make and maybe inshallah we'll try to do that separate session. But wills are important. We should all have a will of how we want to like if something were to happen to us, like the father and mother, who do we want to take care of the kids? Who's going to be responsible for the kids? And that inshallah we'll try to do a separate session. Ji.
I have two questions.
Ji.
One is that a person book a flat on the installment basis, and at the after a period, he needs to buy a house for his mother or anyone, and now he has two assets, two houses. So one is in the rent, the second he's living. So on the both, he has to give the zakat, or on the second one, he has to give on the rent income.
No, yeah, if the house that you live in you don't pay zakat on it, the rental house that you bought just to rent, not to resell.
No, no, it's not for living purpose.
Yeah, but you can change intention. So if it's either for renting or for living of your mother or family member, whoever that might be, then you don't pay zakat. Only when you plan it, you buy it to resell. That's when you include the property value.
And the second question is that the house is on rent, we are getting the rent, it is in the bank. Okay, so we have to separate the income on put the account on that, or just to take the year-end balance, or what?
Yeah, you take a snapshot. It's easier because all your money will be coming in and out. So you take a snapshot on your zakat date. Whether it came one day before, it came 11 months before, you include all.
I don't have to calculate the cost on the rent income.
I mean, because it's cash, so it's in your account. I mean, unless you have it physical cash, then you want to include that also.
Among the recipients of zakat, there are relatives, non-relatives, siblings. Is there a preference or that we need to prefer close relatives or something?
Actually, I have it here at this slide. Yeah. So yeah, relatives should be preferred if they are because relatives have more rights on us, and then we should try to pay it locally. If a lot of times what happens is like, so let's say I'm from India, I send all my zakat. If I send all my zakat to India, there are poor people in America. Nobody's sending zakat to America, So that's why local people have rights. So we should try to find local. We can send some internationally also. We have people we know, but it should not be like we are sending everything there. We should also try to use locally. But I mean, if there's a special situation like Pakistan had a flood or something, and then we are doing, that's different. But we should also not do that. We don't spend here and we send everything overseas. Should be local as well.
One more
Ji.
question. So my question really I didn't word it right, but among the relatives, do we have preference? Like we need to consider siblings first, and then.
No, I mean, yeah, that is your choice. Whoever you want to disburse, who you can make your best judgment of who is in more need and how much to give one person. It's also another thing that we don't give so much zakat to one person that he might also. But again, there are some scenarios maybe we can talk about. Like sometimes it might help because you want to help him establish a business or things like that. But in general, giving too much zakat to one person is not recommended. You should try to. Yeah, then he will have to start calculating himself, right? So I know there are a few things. What's that?
You put the fire first, not miskin too, right?
No, that is just the order in which it's mentioned in the Quran.
Is order important? Like if I had the two options, should I go with fire?
Yeah, people who don't have basic needs met.
This like the fire has the basic needs, miskin doesn't have it, but the fire is the first one.
Yeah, like I said, the definition is interchangeable. Some scholars actually do the reverse definition. But you can take the judgment of where it's more useful. It's you don't have, like some scholars actually say divide up and give some in every category. That is another option as well. But again, as long as you are disbursing an amount to one of the recipients, it will get counted. I know we are running a little behind, so let me quickly go to investments. So, and when we say investments, we are talking about halal investments. Okay, so if an investment is not halal, then we should do tawbah and we try to basically sell and whatever talk to. There might be penalties and stuff involved. So we'll have to. It's not something you do overnight, but you need to plan to get out of it, and you count the cash value. But when you're talking about investments, there are halal investments. If people usually want to invest in stocks, mutual funds. For those, that's a separate topic. But people who are interested, there is something called AAOFI standards, which help calculate whether a stock is halal or not. That's a separate discussion. But the intention is important when we are doing an investment. So if you are, let's say, buying a stock for short term, right? You're buying it because you want to resell. So that's profit making. And a lot of people tend to be traders, not really investors. So if I buy a stock, a halal stock, and then the intention is I bought it at 100, when it goes to 125, I'm going to sell it. So now this is a separate cat. Intention is important here. And another intention is you buy it because you believe this company is growing, it has a future. Now you are a partner in that company. You are basically trying to be part of it through that. So if you have a long-term horizon to an investment, or you are a short-term horizon to investment. If it's short-term profit making, then when you do your zakat calculations, then the current market value. So let's say I'm doing my zakat calculation on 1st of Ramadan. You go into your Robinhood or Fidelity or whatever the account is, and you look at what is it trading at right now on that day, or closing cost or whatever, it might be easier. And then you use 100% of that value. If it's a short-term trade, then it's basically like trade merchandise. You are buying it not to be a partner in the company, you're buying it to sell it again. So you use 100% of the current market value if your intention is short-term trading. So let's say you have 100 shares of a company, current value is $100, you include $10,000 in your calculation in your assets. But if you're a long-term investor, you invested in this company because you see that it's going to grow and you don't plan to sell it, you have a long-term horizon more than 12 months to keep it, then you are like a partner in that company. And like I was saying, any business that you run, not all assets owned by a business is zakatable. So machinery and those kind of products, they are not zakatable. So then in that case, what ideally should happen is we should look at that stock, and then somebody should go and do analysis saying how much assets of this company are zakatable assets, how much assets are non-zakatable assets, and here you can do. But it's hard to do, especially if you have a lot of investments, different companies. It's practically not possible to do. So scholars have done some research. They took 100 stocks, 200 stocks, they analyzed multiple stocks to say, and if those who are interested, I can share the literature on it. They came up with a proxy value that usually we see that all companies at least have 40%, for example, at the max have 40% of zakatable assets. And then some might have 25. So depending on the area, but the scholars have recommended, because it's hard for people who are not full-time investors to do all these calculations, you can do a proxy calculation from 25 to 40% number, and whatever your current market price, let's say is 25%. So $100 is the current market price, so you don't include $10,000, you include $2,500. So that's the proxy to include, because not all assets are zakatable of that business, and you are a partner in that business. If somebody has RSUs that are non-vested stocks, it's not vested yet. If you lose the job, you quit the job, you're not going to get that anymore. So that's future income. You will not include future income. So you only count vested stocks when including G values for investments. Now retirement accounts, 401k, IRAs. So there is regular 401ks, IRAs. There is Roth 401k, IRAs. The difference between them is one is pre-tax investments, one is post-tax investments. So there are different opinions about what to do with this. And some of us who have been investing from a long time, they might have accumulated a decent amount of money here. It's important that so one opinion is that you include 100% of the market value. So whatever is the current market value of all for your 401k, you include that. That's one opinion. Another opinion is because you don't have open access to it, you cannot withdraw it completely. So what you will do is, if I were to liquidate this today, how much will I get? So usually in your brokerage accounts, you can go in and say, if I wanted to withdraw it all, there will be a penalty. There will be a 10% penalty, withdrawal penalty. You don't actually have to do it, but you have to calculate it. So 10% penalty, then this, because if it was pre-tax, then there will be taxes that will kick in. That comes to about 35 to 50% of the value. If it's Roth, then there's only penalty, there's not that. So that opinion is that if you, and there's calculators usually in brokerage accounts will tell you, if you liquidate everything, what would you get in hand? And you include that amount, that's the amount, because you chose to invest it here, you decided where to invest, in which stocks, which funds, and the intention is for growth. So it should not be that because I cannot withdraw completely, I will skip it, but we should take and calculate the withdrawal penalty. What can you actually withdraw? The other opinion is also because it's basically stocks. So, and you're a long-term investor in the stock, so you can do the 25 to 40% calculation that we talked about earlier. If there is a cash component in it, and again, hopefully we're not doing bonds that are interest-based. Again, I'm just talking about it from a fixed perspective. I'm not giving personal finance decisions of what you should do with your money. But if it's cash, then you will look at what is the penalty to withdraw it. You'll look at that. If it's a stock, you could use the 25 to 40% proxy value. Sometimes people have a lot of 401k amount and they don't have enough cash or assets to pay without withdrawing. So another opinion is that you do the calculation, you include it every year. When you retire and when you actually get access to the money, now you have to pay for the previous years. This is usually hard to keep track of. Like you have to be very diligent to really do this. So usually 2 and 3 are a little bit more practical that you can use. But these are the opinions out there for our retirement accounts. Now there are other retirement accounts like pensions, social security. There's like, for example, back in India, they have provident funds where you don't get a choice whether you want to invest or not. They are automatically deducted and you cannot opt out. You don't get to choose where they will be invested, right? So those things that you had no say in and you had no ownership, they basically were deducted automatically. You don't include them and you only pay zakat on them when you, like social security, for example, you are contributing every month with your paycheck, but you don't include it because you had no say in them. You could not go and say, I don't want to do this. 401k, yes, you can say that I don't want to do this. Here you had no choice. So this category you will only pay for when you receive the money and not for the previous years, right? This is because it was taken without your say. And then if it's, we come to cryptocurrency, similar idea there. And again, when you talk about cryptocurrency, there are scholars who don't consider cryptocurrency halal, right? So again, if you follow that opinion, then you will not invest in cryptocurrency. And if you're not investing in cryptocurrency, then there's no talk of zakat on it. So, but there are scholars who have defined when can cryptocurrency be invested in. So if you are investing in crypto, then at the time of purchase, same category, are you doing it for short-term profit making? And I would go out and say that probably at least the things that we have seen, usually not many people even understand crypto. They are investing because somebody else told, oh, I bought it at 1,000, now it's at 5. So they have fear of missing out and they want to invest. But usually most people are profit makers, traders in crypto. They don't necessarily know what the coin is for, what was the business use case for it. So these are short-term traders, and short-term traders should, anything that you are trading in, like I said, if I have a business, I buy and sell gold, then gold is my tradable merchandise, right? I'll include that. If I am a seller of dates, then dates is my merchandise. Like if I buy and sell cars, then for anything for resale is part of trade merchandise. You will include 100% of the asset. If you are actually in that minority who actually understands the business use case of crypto and what it is for, but even in those scenarios, for example, Bitcoin is created as a payment mechanism. It's a digital currency. They still get counted in a currency. So even if you have a long-term vision, you don't plan to sell Bitcoin, you just want to hold. But because it's like a currency, it's a form, like it's like you have some amount in US dollars and some amount in rupees and some amount in pounds. You're going to include all your cash, doesn't matter the currency. If you have it in Bitcoin, that's also a form of currency that's actually accepted as a payment mechanism in multiple places. You'll include the 100% of the value on that day. Right? Again, that's why the fixing of the day is very important. But otherwise, one day it's 20% down, other is 20% up. And that's why the speculative nature is why some scholars recommend not investing in it. And that's why it might not be a great investment for you. So again, only for those people who actually invest. Then there are other categories of cryptocurrencies as well, like Ethereum can be a smart contract. So if you're actually investing because you feel like Ethereum is going to become a mechanism through which you will do smart contracts, there's a different ruling for it. If you are using it as a proof of ownership of an item, there's tokens that can be created. So let's say it's a proof of ownership of a real estate property. Then whatever asset, it is called an asset-backed token. So if it's backed by an asset, if that asset is zakatable, then this is also zakatable. If this asset that it is backing is not zakatable, it's not zakatable. So yeah, if you are in that category, if you have questions, I don't want to go into too much detail. We have time short. So that's the long. Usually, like I said, most people will fall in the category of including all your 100% of your crypto asset current market value. So let's do a quick example, right? Again, this is just random numbers I made, right? So let's say on the day of your zakat calculation, you look at your bank account balance. In one bank account, I have $3,000. Now that $3,000 could have come one day before, it could have come 11 months before. Like I said, the fluctuations between are not taken care of. You're looking at snapshot. Second bank account I have, it has $5,000. And that's why you want to make a custom sheet for yourself, because you know how many accounts you have. You might have accounts in other countries. You want to list out all and then convert it into one currency to calculate. You might have cash on hand, cash in your pockets, in your wallets, under the mattress, whatever it might be. You need to include those as well. So let's say somebody has $500. Now somebody has investment in trading stocks, $10,000, you include that. So that's why it's important to do calculations. If you have long-term investment, then that can be have that factor of 25 to 40% to do. So let's say $20,000 investment, but it's a long-term investment, so you'll only include $8,000. Somebody has 401k, 100% stocks. Again, if you do the 40% method, $4,000, $40,000. Gold jewelry, 22 carat. What's my current market value for it? 18 carat. Receivables. So this will all give you your total zakatable assets, right? So that's why everybody, once you make one customized for yourself, then it's easier. The first year it will take you a period of time to think. Oftentimes it happens that we think we have calculated everything, and then, oh, I never thought about this. This is also something I should have included. So make a list for yourself. Once you have the total zakatable asset, in this example is $86,500, then you look at short-term liabilities. I have credit card balance, $500 here, $100 here, halal mortgage payments, $36,000, just making a random example. This is not real numbers. Car payments, okay, again, only principal, cannot include interest. So they'll come up with your total liabilities, your short-term liabilities. So you have your zakatable assets minus your total liabilities. In this scenario, it comes to $86,000 minus $43,000. The remaining is $43,900. Now on this $43,900, it's greater than nisab. It's more than both. So it's then you do 25% or 2.5%, sorry, or divide by 40, and now the zakat is 1,097.5. So we need to do, and there are online calculators available as well, but again, they will tell you the categories, and then you have to add up those categories. What I like to do is, again, make your own sheet. You know which accounts, so you don't miss including some accounts that you have, because the calculator will not know what accounts you own. There's also a template I made just for myself, like bank account, like sheet. Like I said, every year I do this personally, and I would suggest everybody do this. I make a tab, 2025, I have it going back, mashallah, a lot of years. And then every year, just make a copy, and then you already know what gold you have. So it's the same thing. Like if you have gold, you might have to take it to a jeweler, or you might have to get the weighing scale to see how much gold I have, and find out what's the market value of 22 karat gold on that day. So if it's 18 karat gold, then it might have a different market value. So you make an asset list, you make your short-term liability list, and that's your assets minus liabilities and zakat. So if somebody has questions, like I said, I'm before Salah also we can address them. I have listed the URL for these slides here as well. So if you want to use the QR code, or you can use that URL, that calculator template, again, you'll have to customize it for your scenario. So you can use that as well. My number is here. If you want to if you want to discuss something that you're not comfortable discussing in a public setting,